I know tonight's conversation and the performances are going to be amazing. So I just wanted to thank you all on behalf of the Gathering Spot for joining us this evening. So thank you.
Thank you, Brianna. Hey, my name is Chandra Stevens Albright. I tried to meet as many of you as possible before the show started. I'm the managing director here at True Colors Theater. What that means is I'm the left brain. Jamil Jude, our artistic director, can't be here tonight, but he is the one who selects and curates our beautiful shows, and we're so excited to be a part of this event tonight, and so excited to have those of you who are Gathering Spot members here with us. We do treasure this relationship, and those of you who are here with others, come back. I want to make sure that we let you know that we choose our plays because Jamil has 3D, ESP, all the things. And so he chose this play 2 years ago, and now we're still dealing with issues of police violence. And so it's really important that we have these shows because it gives us a chance, not only on stage at the show, but here to have those conversations about how we manage those from wherever we are. So we want to make sure that you see in your seat a $10 pass for the show. There are flyers in the back as well. Please feel free to tell your friends to come out to the show. We're going to have a wonderful evening tonight. We always have, in addition to the panel discussion, some art so you can get a taste of our work. So we will be doing that. I want to thank our wonderful moderator, Janita Du. Janita, just wave your hand. She's the best. Janita was our board chair and was on the board for several years, and she's a wonderful head of DEI, Diversity, Equity, Inclusion at Warner Brothers Discovery, and she's just a bad. So she, she's amazing. We're going to start this evening right off with our friend, the beautiful Terry Henry, who is going to do a piece from Good Bad People by Rachel Lynette. It's a world premiere. Terry, thank you.
Oh my goodness. Miss Terry Henry, please let's give her another round of applause, please. How powerful is that? Really, I'm so pleased to be here to have a true talk about this very difficult subject. And as Chandra said, I'm a proud former board member and former chair of True Colors. I'm Executive Vice President of Integrity and Inclusion for CNN, and the Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer for CNN and Warner Brothers Discovery Sports. And I can't tell you how honored I am to be here with this panel to talk about these issues. We shall not be moved, fighting for our lives, fighting for our stories. So first, I'd like to introduce at the far end, Mr. Derek Bozeman, host of Too Much Truth with Derek Bozeman on 1380 WAOK. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yes. Then we have Mr. Donnell Suggs. You may know him as editor-in-chief of the Atlanta Voice, and he's wearing his Freedom of the Press shirt. Welcome, Donnell.
That's on purpose.
And Gerald Griggs, I don't know how all the men got on one side, but we have Gerald Griggs, attorney and president of the NAACP of Georgia. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. Dr. Kalinda Lee, who is a scholar and former head of interpretation at the National Center for Civil and Human Rights. Welcome.
Here. Thank you.
And Miss Mary Hooks, who is co-founder, who is co-founder of the Atlanta chapter of Black Lives Matter and former co-director of Southerners on New Ground.
And National Field Secretary with the Movement for Black Lives.
And National Field Secretary of the Movement for Black Lives. So let's set the scene, so to speak. As we just saw, that performance by Terry Henry was so powerful. The setting of Good, Bad People is 2019, and it shows a Black family struggling with deciding how to speak out and face the media following the murder of their youngest family member, Amiri, who was only 23 years old. These stories are all too common, as we know. A cop mistook Amiri for someone who he was looking for and shot him while he was simply taking out the trash. This gives us an opportunity to really reflect. And as you heard the mother say at the top, there's this question about seeking how to portray these victims of police violence. And the older sister is speaking to a reporter in a very monumental point in the script. This older sister named Jane is speaking to a reporter, and the reporter is seeking a presentable image of Amiri. And I said Jane, I meant June. June tells the reporter, there's just no way I can hand you a picture that they won't turn against him. He was human, end of sentence. I shouldn't need to hand you a picture of him smiling in a tuxedo to prove that to you. This really does open up the discussion about the tension and this idea of, as Dr. Lee would say, respectability politics, the importance of presenting victims and leaders in a certain way. In that opening clip, we saw a reference to Tatiana Jefferson, who was shot while she was playing video games with her nephew. I wrote a commentary in 2019 at the time called "Outrage Must Continue Even When Victims of Police Shootings Don't Seem Perfect." There's often this effort of social justice movements and the media to show the spotlight on the perfect victims to raise the nation's consciousness. But what does that mean? And what does that do to families who are suffering as they're trying to determine how to share their stories? Do you think that this idea of respectability or perfection around victims is something that is concerning? I'll let anybody jump in here.
Well, as a member of the media, my job is to tell the story. I think it's important to get the facts first, but it's a thin line for us because we're a Black newspaper, so we're supposed to tell the story, but we're also, at sometimes, people think we're supposed to be on the side of the victim, which is most normally someone that's African American, Black. And it's a hard walk to try to make sure we tell the story, respect the victim, respect the victim's family, et cetera. So it's hard, but it's something that needs to be done. And I try my best to get myself and my staff to do it.
That's right. Do you have a thought, Dr. Lee?
I do. One of the things I think, even before we get to victimhood,
I think, is this perception that Black people are guilty unless proven innocent to begin with. So what you're framing is this idea that this person who already, always, just because they are, might have deserved it, didn't deserve it. And I think that that's really, at the center of what is so infuriating and what there's so much pushback about, because we're in a culture, we're in a society where our humanity has been negated as a foundation for building the wealth of the society in the very beginning. When I was growing up and first started kind of coming into my own as an activist in high school, I remember my mother used to say to me, "You have to always be careful because they have children, but we just have young." And I think that lack of understanding of us as human and building empathy is really at the core of this.
And so I come to this a little differently, being an attorney and understanding that you have to humanize your client, whether your client is living or dead. And so I already come to it from the perspective that we have to build out our own narrative and tell our clients real truth and their story. So when I heard this story and I thought about Tatiana Jefferson, it led me to Leighton Boykin or Jimmy Atchison or Vincent Truitt when they had already been criminalized. And so, my brother Lee and my brother Ben do an excellent job, and we have to, as attorneys, do an excellent job of humanizing our client. Because nothing justifies someone being shot in their back, in their head, in their home. None of that matters when it comes down to the actual law. What the police or the greater society is trying to do is build in the justification by saying, look, this person doesn't deserve your empathy. This person doesn't deserve your compassion because they are a criminal. And so we come at it as attorneys from the perspective of you have to humanize your client to make sure that the beginnings of the wheels of justice are not already tilted. And sometimes that's difficult because, sometimes in the media they want the perfect victim. I think of the conversation I had with Fred Gray over his choice of clients. And so Fred was 24 years old when he had his first client, which is called Claudette Colvin. And so there's this myth out here that Claudette was not put forward because of some of the baggage that may have come along with that. But actually talking to Fred, he said, no. What happened was we proceeded with a legal theory on Claudette's case that was different from Rosa Parks' case. So as the attorney, you have to attack it from the fact pattern you have and humanize your client so that the media and, of course, law enforcement does not control the narrative.
Any thoughts about that, Mary, as in terms of your activism?
Yeah, and I think a big part of our work, I agree with much of what the panelists have already said, and I think that what is very challenging is because the work of change makers and revolutionaries and those of us who are trying to also assert another story our role is to also delegitimize the system. And sometimes we spend and have to go through so much spending time to, be honest about who this person was or who they had a good job, they had folks who love them. And we spend so much time trying to defend the dignity of our people that oftentimes we don't get to scrutinize and tell the truth about the institution that is actually guilty. And we don't get a chance to do the level of systemic analysis and be able to tell the truth about the patterns and name the ways in which this has been a system of violence and policing on our people. And that's the part that hurts as someone who, Lord have mercy, have unfortunately been inside of these conversations too many times. And we just know that a big part of our work that is cut out for us is having to continue to convince the general public, society, our own people, who the real culprit is. And it's not just about saying it's the individual police officer. we're very clear, and if you didn't know tonight, you're going to know, that it is not just about the individual officer. We know that it is an institution. The whole institution is rotten to its core. They produce rotten apples, right? Rotten police officers. And so I think that a big part of our work and part of the work of media, et cetera, is to continue to delegitimize the system. So our folks aren't having to try to defend the dignity of our folk. Like, we shouldn't have to do that.
And yes, go ahead,
No.
please.
The reality of it is that we have to defend our right every day. We have to defend our dignity every day. If you turn on any news tonight, regardless of whether you're in Atlanta, Baltimore, Chicago, Philadelphia, you will see black people stealing, killing, shooting, maiming. But you would ask yourself now, do white people do any of these crimes? Because they don't get the same narrative, they don't get the same attention. And what it does to us psychologically, even we begin to believe, oh God, we're really a bad people. And so we have to defend our lives in every endeavor, not just in terms of the reality. True Colors came into existence because we didn't get the play on the main stage. We wanted to create something that was uniquely ours. That's what Kenny Leon said. And so every day when we show up, we have to defend black lives. We have to defend it in every venue that we're in. While I do radio, I'm an activist. I've been on the city council. I understand how policy making, I understand how it happens. And so I'm not the press. When black folks want to get their word out, they call me because I'm unapologetically black. I come from a black perspective. I look at whether it's good for grandmama and them first and let the other people worry about it because they have their venues that do the exact same thing. So our responsibility is to defend black life even before it ends up on the ground with 5 or 6 bullet holes. That everywhere we go, where there is a message being sent antithetical to who we are, that's when we have to begin to defend us at all turns, at all costs.
And it is a heavy burden that's placed on the shoulders of the family members, as we've heard when we think of the play and the older sister, and just that feeling that this is my loved one, yet I have to prove to the world that the value, that he had value. Like that is a heavy burden. And I can imagine for those of you who are counseling the families, I can just imagine how difficult that is. How do you help them through that?
Well, I would just say it's a lot. It's a day-by-day struggle because no one can truly understand the level of pain that these families are going through, because not only did you lose a loved one, but now you have to be thrust into the spotlight while you're still grieving, and you have to deal with the negativity that's going to come your way. So how we deal with it, of course, we have psychologists and psychiatrists who offer that type of trauma mediation and mitigation, but the pain doesn't stop. And so how we generally handle it is to explain to them that this is a journey, that there are others who have been through this journey and at different parts of the journey, and to connect those families together, because I can't truly understand what it's like to lose my brother or my sister at the hands of a police officer. But there are others that do, and they can go through that trauma and give them coping mechanisms. But let's be honest, you never, ever, ever get over this level of trauma. I can remember meeting the relatives of Emmett Till, and they are still going through that level of trauma, and it just renewed when there's another case that happens. So it's a process.
And I think the other reality is that what families have begun to understand, that the media is we cannot discount it. It's a very powerful tool. So what you now see is families get representation. I would have no problem. I tell people to call Gerald Griggs, NAACP. Go there first, because they have a history and a track record of defending black lives and defending black people and not just being media hogs. Go to people who love us. If you can't handle it because you got to grieve your baby, you ain't got time to be being asked sideways questions about where he was and why he was out there that time of night and all of that, because that becomes too much. And so look for Mary Hooks. Look for an organization that have stood in the gap and have represented well, because the reality of it is newspapers sell newspaper. Those TV channels are trying to sell advertisers and attract, and the crazier they make black people look, you can damage your whole reputation of the person that was lost, and even your own personal reputation by just getting on there and saying the wrong thing. And that's why that news reporter shows up. If you don't have a personal relationship with him, I can tell you in my political life and in my professional life, I know every news anchor in this city. And I've had to call them back line to say, what you're about to report is not true, right? Even about myself and other people. And they call and ask. And if you're an organization out here, you need to have that kind of relationship. Anybody on this panel in this all could pick up the phone and say, Derek, here's a story. I need to get some airtime for this. And I'm going to ask you a couple questions, and then we can run with it. But I would not throw a family out there, because those journalists, and I use that lightly, are there to really push a narrative that sells.
Well, I just, you've just raised so many interesting points, and one of those is traditionally you had civil rights leaders who were really at the forefront, and they intentionally used the media to tell the stories. Dr. King believed that nonviolent resistance could overthrow white supremacy in the South because of the existence of an audience. There was like a media strategy because that audience, the American public, depended on a press that would tell the story. And now what we're seeing, in addition to the more traditional civil rights leaders, you have the next generation who's here, and then you have the attorneys, as you've mentioned, Derek, who are representing the families. The attorneys very often are the new activists, right? The Ben Crumps, the Gerald Griggs, you're the new activists. And do you feel that the media treats the stories differently depending on who the activists are? Do you sense any disparate treatment if you're the NAACP versus Black Lives Matter versus an attorney representing these families?
I don't think we should. I think it should just be the story. I think the story is the story. The unfortunate situation is the unfortunate situation. And being a black newspaper, I think we should just get the story to our people and make sure we get it as accurate as possible. You mentioned Dr. King and the Civil Rights Movement, but those black newspapers were the ones that did those stories first. And then eventually the Civil Rights Movement gets so powerful that everyone has to jump on board. But it was the black press that got the story first. We don't get the story first as much as we used to, because it's better to tell CNN, it's better to tell NBC or whomever. And I get that, but I still get some stories from folks, a little smaller scale, and it's like, I better tell y'all first because I know the people that read you are the people that live in my neighborhood. And that's the exclusivity that we still have. We don't have it as much, but we still have it, so.
I think a couple of different things come up for me with the question that you raised. One thing I think about is you talked about the audience, right? There's always a question in the work that I do in curatorial work, exhibitions, writing, whatever the case may be. We always think about who our audience is, even if we're not explicitly articulating that, right? So when we talk about the American public, who are we talking about? What do we mean? Because I'm part of that public, right? I used to always say when I was at the Atlanta History Center, and they would say, well, you can't tell those black stories because, Southerners might have exception. Well, black folks are the most Southern folks that there are in this nation. 4.5 million people who were Southerners were real happy when the Confederates did not win the Civil War. So I'm not sure about what you mean when you say Southerners feel a particular way. So I think when we think about audience, it's really important to understand first and foremost who we're speaking to, who we're prioritizing, and to trouble the way that we put that in a hierarchy that puts black folks at the bottom. And I think the other thing that's coming up for me in terms of all of this is that while it is always important, I'm an historian, so I deal in the evidence of the past. So I think a lot about the facts. But the facts don't matter in and of themselves as a list of dates and names and et cetera. It's the process of giving those facts meaning that makes a story. It's the narrative. It's what it's telling us. So it's not at such and such a time this person left the house, and at such and such a time they walked down the street, and at such and such a time the police shot them. It's, what does that mean? They were criminal and they deserve shooting. It's not safe for us to walk our streets. What is the meaning that's imbued in all of that? And I think that you have to have certain perspectives represented to even look for that story, to even think about what those meanings might be.
Yeah, and I think there's something too about the way in which you were saying, like, who used to be like the first ones to get called, and now with social media, folks are like, I got my own audience, I got my own following, and put stuff out there for the, whoever is following them doing their thing. And I think what I've experienced and what we oftentimes see in this work is that, when we want to put forth a story and be able to shape narrative, it is very hard, especially when we want to tell an honest truth about the context of what has happened in a particular situation. If we want to blatantly say this was white supremacist, we want to blatantly say this is because of homophobia, if this, whatever it is, however we want to talk about it, oftentimes that gets watered down and censored, so much so where the political analysis that is trying to be asserted, the power analysis, the trying to complicate the story, oftentimes get watered down. And what I think that, what has been interesting is that, which also is very difficult too, is that yes, I think Dr. King had a very strong point around, the audience had to be there. They had to bear witness to what is happening. But now we see it. We see it so often. We see it so much. It's like, like the countdown to they're going to release the video, like it becomes almost spectacle, almost spectacle. And I think during that particular time in history, like TV wasn't around that long, you know what I mean? So stuff was still cool, coming out. But now I think it's sometimes I'm a little, I get a little bit discouraged about how we actually use this tool to advance, and not just advance the story, but also to bring people in, for people not only see themselves as audience, but also an active participant, that the story is an invitation to fight. And I think back in the day, I think that was very much true. And this time, these days, it feels much, much tougher to do that.
This is so powerful, and I'm so sorry to interrupt, but this is a perfect point to take a moment, really, and hear from Amitria Fanay, who's going to perform for us Marvin Gaye's What's Going On, right? Because that's what we're really asking. And we are going to follow up on what you've just raised, Mary, because this is the heart of the discussion. But first, Amitria, we'll let you come on and perform. And Amitria co-starred in True Colors production of Maria and Rosetta. Just want to put that out there. And we're so thrilled to have you here.
Mother, mother, there's far too many of you crying. Brother, 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 there's far too many of you dying. You know we have got to find a way to bring some love in here today. Oh, Father, Father, there's no need to escalate. See, war is not the answer, for only love can conquer hate. a way to bring some love in here today. Oh, picket lines and picket signs. Don't punish me with brutality. Come and talk to me so you can see, hey, what's going on? What's going on? Tell me what's going on. What's going on? Ooh. Ah, yeah, 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 yeah. Hey, yeah, 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 yeah. Do-do-do, do-do-do, do-do-do. Mother, mother, why is it they hate us so much? Oh, is it because we're human and my hair is kinky tough? Oh, you know we have got to find a way to bring some love in here today. Oh, oh, picket signs and picket signs. Don't punish me with brutality. Come and talk to me so you can see what's going on. What's going on? Tell me what's going on. I know you what's going on. Ooh. Punish me with brutality. Come and talk to me so you can see what's going on. What's going on? I said picket lines and picket signs. Don't punish me with brutality. Come and talk to me so you can see what's going on. What's going on? What's going on? Thank you.
So much. Thank you. Miss Ametria Fanay, accompanied by S. Renee Clark. Thank you. Oh. I'm telling you, it's very emotional. The message, the song, the discussion. I can feel the emotion from our panelists. We are living and walking these stories every day, either as members of the media or as activists or those who are studying and trying to tell these stories and shape the narrative. And so I do want to bring us back to where we ended. And Mary, thank you so much for what you were saying. Listen, the late, great Ida B. Wells said, the way to right wrongs is to turn the light of truth upon them. And as we've discussed, there is, I believe, an intention with the media to tell stories in order to make a difference. But as you started to share, the challenge is, how do we tell these stories in such a way that we don't become desensitized, in such a way that we're not only focusing on Black trauma and outrage, and I know you were starting to jump in, so I want to let you do that, Danelle.
Yes, because I'm in an antiquated business. I'm a newspaper reporter. Raise your hand if you know personally a newspaper reporter. It's like 6 people. So, you know me now, it's 7. Look, we'll never be able to reach as many people as TikTok. We're just not. TikTok has more people looking at that than the New York Times. So me, at the Atlanta Voice, I'm never gonna have the reach of that. And I get that. So I have to be very particular about the stories that I have my staff chase down and the stories that I tell, because they need to be real local, real Atlanta. I gotta be in someone's living room, because I'm not gonna have the reach for Twitter or TikTok or an Instagram. So when she was mentioning about, the misinformation, that comes from that social media stuff. It goes back and forth, and anyone can do it. And I like to think that I was educated to do this professionally, so hopefully you'll take my story and say, you know, that's legitimate compared to something you might have heard on Facebook. So it's an uphill battle, and we're never going to be able to really catch it. So we just try to do our best work every day. Try.
And so I kind of wanted to jump in here. And, you know, when you talk about Ida B. Wells and you talk about Walter White and you talk about the legendary activists of the past, they were also journalists. And so when we talk about W.E.B. Du Bois, they were journaling about their time, and they used the medium of their time to get the stories out. Dr. King was a prolific orator during the golden age of television. We are coming into the dawn of the golden age of the internet, and we have to call everyone in to become activists. Because one thing that I'm learning and still gathering is learning from the great lawyers of the past, you know, the Fred Grays of the world or the Donnelly Hollowells and people like that. You had two audiences. One, you had the greater public, and then two, you had a jury. Because in order to get to whatever a semblance of justice is, and again, real justice would be having these victims back and alive. But what we can get, we have to make sure we use the medium of today to make sure we tell the stories accurately. And so, yes, there's a lot of misinformation on social media, but there's also a lot of the breaking cases on social media. I can remember a jogger in Scintilla Shores who was killed 3 years ago now, tomorrow, that we wouldn't have known about his case but for the viral images that were shared by certain digital journalists now. And so I think we have to use the tools of the past. We have to make sure that we have strategy. You know, there were activists, there were lawyers, there were journalists, there was the entire community who came together, whether it was through newspapers, or Jet Magazine to be exact, for the pictures of Emmett Till, or it was the television and the cameras that followed Dr. King during the Civil Rights Movement after they covered what we'll be going to re-commemorate in a few days at the Edmund Pettus Bridge, or now the digital images of George and the digital images of Ahmaud. And so we have to make sure we combine that strategy of the past, because we have to call everybody in. You know, I never thought I was going to be an activist on the front lines with Mary or with Derek. But once I saw that injustice, it was time to activate. But that didn't mean I left my skills behind. And so we have to make sure, as in the past, we're called in all of the community to bring all of their skills to bear to get to some semblance of what justice looks like. Because if it wasn't for the community running with Ahmaud, Travis and Gregory McMichael and William Roddy Bryant would still be walking free. And Jackie Johnson wouldn't be facing indictment. So we have to remember, this is calling us in to this social justice movement, and we have to bring our tools.
I would agree with everything that's been said so far. I would just add, especially when you invoked Ida B. Wells, that, you know, when she wrote the Red Record to investigate lynchings, she was actually focused on uncovering something that had not been deemed newsworthy at all. And I think that in many ways, that's exactly what you're still talking about, right? Is that these tools often are giving people an opportunity to share information about things that have often not been deemed newsworthy at all. And there is so much power in that, even though those tools can be misused. And so the good journalism, right? I mean, I would argue that there can be good journalism in TikTok. There can be good journalism in there. I don't know how to find it, but there could be. and I think that that's really, really important, though, right? That we're bringing that level of quality and demand, but also utilizing the tools of our time, like you say, and understanding the power of these various media. You know, after Ida B. Wells wrote Red Record, they bombed her office. They tried to kill her. So it's a deep and profound thing to understand how powerful that was, how meaningful that was, and the fact that 100 years later, we're still saying her name and remembering the work that she did. That's our task, too.
Do you have any other thoughts, Mary? Because you really did start this part of the conversation when you were talking about just the nonstop coverage in a way, because there are so many shootings, there's so much police violence. How does the media balance raising awareness with not wanting to traumatize, really, not just the families, but viewers in the community as well?
Yeah, well, you know, I deeply believe in organizing and organization. And so I believe that, you know, a big part of how, because, you know, this is what news does. This is what gets reported. And I think the only way to combat that is to be able to have the medicine of being a part of organization and being a part of something bigger and connected, bigger than yourself. And so when it happens, you have your people, you have your political home, you have your family, whomever, that you're able to connect with, but also the healing that comes in the fight back, the healing that comes in the hope and belief and being a part of the struggle and being a part of moving the ball forward and bending the arc, you know, toward justice. Like those things are also part of that healing, because in isolation, just watching it, just, you know, hearing it all the time, it does have play an immense role on folks' mental, emotional, and spiritual health. And so I think regardless of whatever type of screen it is, whether it be the news screen or the phone screen, you have to put it down and be able to connect human to human connection in real time. That is a balm that nothing, you know, no matter the medium, nothing can do what it feels like to connect with other people, especially in moments of heartbreak, but also in times of hope and possibility. And that's what organizing allows us to do.
That's beautiful. That's really beautiful. And the fact that you focused on mental health and the power of organizing to really build that sense of community. So it's really community healing that you're talking about. Derek, it looked like you wanted to jump in a little bit.
I agree with everybody. You know, in radio, one of the things I get the advantage of doing in radio is my show is live. There have been many times when something jump off. What I do, I don't look for all of the stories or everybody's iteration of what happened. I have been able to, on live radio, see what was happening and you know, wherever it was, right? And call, because you're going live. I'm going on there to friend you, and I need you to tell me what is happening on the streets of Detroit right now. Mm-hmm. And can you call my show right now? Because what we're getting is, I'm telling everybody, look, go to his Facebook page, go to this is what's happening. And so when it went off in Ferguson, we were able to look and see, okay, this young man is signed on, this is Billy X on the phone, right? And Billy X is, oh, tell us what you're hearing. They are shooting tear gas, I have my, and you can hear it in real time. And so it's not about traumatizing, it's really about raising awareness, because what they want to do is keep these things local to just this community. Right? If I can keep this just in Scintilla Shores, then all we will have is a local kid who was shot stealing, because that's the narrative that came out about Ahmaud Arbery, that he was in the house stealing. But when I went on my Facebook page and happened to be watching it, because while I'm broadcasting, I'm watching, seeing what's happening, I saw primarily what raised my attention about Ahmaud Arbery. There was so many young white people in the street. Mm-hmm. They then jumped on the highway, and I knew, okay, something serious done went down there. I don't know what went down, but I know. So I started watching, and within a matter of about 30 or 40 minutes, I know a young man had been killed under very suspicious circumstances, and I knew to keep watching, because that kind of visceral reaction does not just happen just because somebody was shot, robbed in the liquor store. People felt a real deep sense of pain, and they knew this was wrong. And we began to listen, and it wasn't but a few more days after that I was on the ground down there raising some serious hell. That's what this medium does for us. And in radio, it allows me, if it happens between 4 and 7 drive time, and I see it, I'm telling my producer, call or hit that person in the DM and see if we can get them on here to at least tell us what's happening. And then we can filter it later with backup material. But what I say, breaking live in Decatur. This young man is out in front of, wherever it is, and this is what is happening on the scene now. And that helps people draw their attention, because that story may not get any press, right? It ain't gonna get reported, because that's just another brother that got shot out there doing something he had no business. But the reaction of the community informs us that we need to listen a little bit closer to see what's really happening.
Right, and really, you said that sense of pain, it almost takes us back to where we started. What elicits that sense of pain? Is it because, it just seems so, the circumstances are so suspicious, or as you said, if somebody were just robbing a liquor store, nobody would care? Well, I think it's the responsibility, and it's, again, it's like that burden that everybody carries to ensure that people understand everybody's life has value when they've been wrongfully and violently attacked or killed. And so I do want to talk a little bit about what's happened recently with Tyree Nichols. And, in Notes of a Native Son, which was published in 1955, James Baldwin wrote, "In Harlem, Negro policemen are feared more than whites, for they have more to prove and fewer ways to prove it." And of course, what we saw in the Nichols case in Memphis was that there were multiple black cops involved in his ultimate death and caused his ultimate death. And in the play Good Bad People, the playwright chooses not to reveal the race of the cop that murdered the character, Amiri. One question is, does the reporting around these incidents, does and should the reporting around these incidents be different based on whether it's brutality against a black person by a black cop versus a white cop?
No.
Absolutely not. And one of the things that I wanted to go back to the previous question before I answer this question, that's so special about our community, and that's why what Derek said was so important. We didn't hear from the ground. Black community has a radar. They have a spider sense when something is wrong. And in the Tyree Nichols case, it went off, because how does somebody get beaten that bad and end up dying without something being wrong? And in Atlanta, I know the spider sense went off when we heard about the Scorpion unit, because it seems so eerily reminiscent of the Red Dog unit. And then when we found out the history of the police chief, it all clicked. And so I just think that absolutely not, the reporting should not change because of the race of the police officer. Because I agree with Mary on this. This is about systems.
Yes.
Okay, so it doesn't matter if it's a white police officer or a black police officer, they are still upholding a system of white supremacy that has to be addressed. And we saw that clearly in Memphis, Tennessee. We also saw a desperate treatment of the black police officers as opposed to the white police officer that was clearly in the video. So we have to address the systems. And of course, we do not need to report differently if it's a black police officer as opposed to a white police officer. It's the system that has to be addressed.
That's right. I recommend a book by James Foreman called Locking Up Our Own: Crime and Punishment in Black America, which touches on themes like that. But do you think sometimes the focus on race makes it harder for people to understand the systemic issues and the power issues at play?
Well, I think that it's part of this desire. Mary, we're quoting you again. This is not about individual bad actors. This is not about a bad apple. It is systemic, and the framework for isolating individual bad actors is a reflex historically. It is a reflex that obfuscates the need to discuss the system. So it is not by accident that we tend to like to lean in on a bad person, whether that is a person who's been victimized or a person who is perpetrating whatever violence against that person all the way through murder. So I think that that's a deeply important point. But I also want to say about, Tyree, I didn't watch it. So going back to that question about what it means to meaningfully share information and what it means to share salacious or traumatizing and painful images to the extent that people then become newly desensitized to it is, I think, a question that we have to address, not only because of the trauma that it inflicts, but also because of the space that it opens up for us to say, yeah, that's what we're used to seeing, right? We're used to seeing black men lose their lives. We're used to seeing black women lose their lives. And there is a point at which we do stop, that there have been studies. There is a point at which we do respond differently, that we are measurably less sensitive to that reality. And that is something that we do have to take into account and figure out how to address.
My only concern with that is this. If we push back on the sharing of that type of information, it allows the system to insulate itself. And so the issue is it should call the professionals in, because I'm going to be clear, the Tyree Nichols video was not the worst video I've ever seen. I've seen videos in my practice that are worse than that. And so what I want the American public and the world to understand is there is a systemic problem that we have to witness. If we didn't witness the barbarity of what they did to Emmett Till, there would never have been a civil rights movement. If we didn't have to witness what happened to Ahmaud Arbery, there would not have been any justice in Scintilla Shore. So I know we have to bring the other professionals, our psychologists and psychiatrists in to deal with the trauma, but the system will insulate itself if we say we have to stop sharing this stuff. Because again, they will cover this stuff up. They have been covering it up. And so when I look at a video like that, and of course I watched it several times, it called me and other lawyers in because this should not be normalized by the system. And the system, if it's allowed to cover this up, will normalize it.
I just
Go
think
ahead, Donnell.
it's news, and it has to be broadcast, or it has to be told, it has to be written. It shouldn't, either, no matter what it was, it's gray. It's new information, and we have to tell people what happened. So unfortunately, the video is hard to watch, and I only watched it once, but it needs to be seen, therefore, so everyone can know what happened. Because everyone's not gonna read it, and everyone might not, read the social media posts, whatever that may be. You might not watch your local news, but if we get the video out there, there's a chance that a lot of people are gonna be able to see it, unfortunately. And I think it's good for us to know what happened.
And this difference in point of view is very interesting because this is the reality, right? This is what newsrooms grapple with. And so these perspectives are very important. And I know, we go back to Emmett Till, how brave, right, was his mother to make that decision so that the whole world could see. These are not tough, these are not easy choices that family members have to make. And so it sounds like, Gerald, probably in your role, you've probably had to counsel family members as they've had to make decisions around whether or not video should be shown. In this case, obviously, the prosecutors showed the video, but these are difficult choices. And Mary, did you have a thought about this?
Yeah. I go back and forth about the videos. Sometimes I'll look just so I can be like, my God, just be present with what black folk are, experiencing as folks are watching it. But I think what also is something that we must be careful of too, because that is like, what happens after the fact. This is like the different point of intervention. What I think that we have to insist we show more of is the violence of decisions when it comes to building the institutions, the policies, the money, and everything that creates the conditions whereby that sort of violence can happen. Why there was a Red Dog unit, why there is a cop city that is trying to be built that teaches police officers to be paramilitary, and to do this, all of these tricks in our communities and enact this violence on our folk. We have to show the violence of the decision making in city council, the violence of when we choose not to fund schools or housing, but do not fund life and humans, and choose to fund and tear down forests. Like, that is violent, and we should be appalled. And that is the sort of violence that we should spread, and we should be like, y'all, we gonna watch the city council? Okay, they look like they finna be shady today. I mean, we should be going in, and it should be a stage, always bearing witness to that level of violence, because that level of violence has a different level of impact. And you're right, when we do focus on the one incident, the one thing, we can get very navel-gazing and narrow about it. But when you see all the parts, all the moving pieces, all the violence that is happening, the budget, my God, is a violent document, should be a moral document, and that is deeply violent. And so I think that is just as important, if not more, because if we were struck by that violence, then we would be able to take action before that sort of violence gets enacted, and then we have bodies on the ground. And so that's why folks are in the forest right now, so there won't be bodies on the ground. We're trying to prevent the violence that's already occurring,
Mary Hooks, everyone. Thank you. Oh, thank you so much. I think what we'll do now, we'll allow our audience to ask some questions. If you do have questions, if you could come up to one of our stands, or the stand over there, and our panelists will be happy to answer them.
Hi, hello everyone. Just want to let y'all know real quick, Mary Hooks is that person. I don't want to use the B word. She be out here in the trenches. I met her doing GOTV work, get out the vote, trying to keep people from disenfranchising our people. So down for you, Mary, always. But I wanted to ask the panelists a question. We talked a lot about like narrative building and building narrative power. So what do y'all think that we should be doing as Black people, as people in community with Black people, people who are non-Black? What should we be doing to help combat the narrative of white supremacy in our own lives?
That's a great question. Support Black media. We have Netflix and all them other apps, and pay per month you can get a newspaper subscription. You can even just visit the website, not just mine, any Black media. I think the narrative for us is singly focused, obviously. And if you want to kind of read about that and learn about that, then listen to Support Black Media. It's as simple as a click on a website. We go to other websites, we go watch TV, we do all these other things. We can do that too.
A couple of things. One is get involved with your local elected officials. I tell people, you don't like the way policing going in Atlanta? Mayor Dickens hired the police chief. Mayor Dickens can fire the police chief. Mayor hire police chief, and mayors fire police chiefs, right? Get involved on the city council and run for office. I will tell you, I was a student government president at Morris Brown College. I won my election with 1,959 votes. When I ran for city council and I won in 1998. I ran in a runoff in December, the first week of December, and I won my seat on the city council with 1,598 votes. I had more votes elected me to student government president than elected me to city council, where I was one of 15 making billion-dollar decisions. You do not know, the average person don't know, your average city council person is elected with about 3,000 to 5,000 votes. We have that many at a rally. And so we need, it does matter who sit at that table now, okay? We say representation matters. The best representation you could be is 1 in 15. That was stuff that never got to the floor, because they knew if you get to the floor, I'm gonna tell everybody who supported it. The way policy is made, by the time y'all get to a city council meeting, them people have already decided what was gonna be voted on, and they already know what's gonna pass. The mayor has already put his influence or her influence on it, and what you see is what I say is a kabuki dance. That's a Japanese theater where what's going to happen has already been determined, and you're just looking at the quality of the acting. because the end result has already been determined. So get involved in that, in those local, all politics is local, right? And so whether Wilani Forest get deforested and a $90 million training facility sit on it is the decision of 15 people and a mayor, right? So we ain't got to change the whole world's opinion. We got 15 people to change who were elected, most of them with less than 5,000 votes. That's real power, okay? That's where real power lies. I would do the breakdown of the mayor's race, but you all follow that, right? And so at the end of the day, we need to begin. C.T. Vivian, before he made his transition, said something to me. He said, Derek, we can no longer afford leadership by accident. We have got to train young people. See, when I went to city council, I was already an activist. And so we need activists. I would love to see you out on the front line, but I'd rather see you at city council table. So I know I can pick up the phone and tell you, now this is how. And the other part is biblical and spiritual. Study to show yourself approved. You need to learn how these systems work. You cannot fight an organized system being unorganized. I look at some of what we do, I say it's great, but it ain't gonna end up with a success because it's unorganized. And the system is dependent on you to be unorganized. They were ready for you to protest this last time. The governor had already called up 1,000 National Guard troops 3 days before this tape was gonna come out. He was ready. Y'all see all of those burglar bars around the Georgia State Capitol? That was for y'all. Because the greatest thing these institutions fear is that black people are gonna wake up and they really gonna say, no, this really is about power. And the power is where? Not with the politician, the power is in the people. And when you become unpredictable, that's why I love Black Lives Matter. We show up, we'll jump in the middle of the highway, we'll go to the governor's mansion, we'll go wherever we think the power needs to be altered. And we ain't gonna tell them where we're gonna show up. We ain't gonna tell them what time we're gonna be. We'll come in the morning, night, and evening. The element of surprise is so important in organizing. So I would simply say, get involved and look at this thing scientifically. And then let some of us elders who ain't scared teach you how to alter the power relationship that exists so we can win.
Well, that's tough to follow. But I would add to that, you know, I'm an historian, and I work in museums and in classrooms, and we have to remember. We learn in the same lessons again and again and again. Learning about the past so that we can understand that as context for our present and plan better for our future is an essential job that every single one of us can do. We have the tools to do that. We have the power to do that. And sharing that information within your sphere of influence, whatever that looks like, is also a deeply important and powerful thing that we can do. There is an activist that you probably work with around the Cop City work, who is a preschool owner, Rukia, who is the owner of the preschool that my children went to. These little bitties, before they even got to kindergarten, understanding a sense of what justice means, of what their power looks like, of what their ancestors and elders have done, and seeing in themselves the ability to make change, to plant those trees and understand what's fair and what's right and what's not, and raise their little voices is meaningful. That is powerful. It is a step towards the kinds of things that we're talking about here. So I would say that that's really important. And the other thing I want to say, just going back to what we were talking about before, to share these videos or not, to look at this violence or not, is we have to really take it on to care for one another. Mm-hmm. You know, so much of the work that I do in, say, a museum setting or exhibition setting or whatever, it's not about not telling the story. It's not about not sharing what's difficult, but I have a responsibility not just to invite somebody in and show some picture of a black body hanging and say, now go home and do something with that, right? We have to care for one another and understand each other's humanity in that process. And that also is something that we can lift up, that we can do, that we can understand that that's as much a part of our activist work as anything else.
Great. Thank you so much. We'll move on to the next question.
I love how we talked about the different angles of the activism and talking about calling more people into the actual fight. A lot of times the activists we celebrate have ended up being killed because they've been like the main people saying, we're gonna stand against you. What are the processes of the support behind those people, and like what are the, okay, if we're all a community or say a football team and there's people actually on the field, and those are the people like you all standing on stage, there usually is coaches on the side for each part of the actual game, and then there's somebody up high that don't nobody see looking at everything that's happening, that's calling the plays. But then beyond that, there are people who own it and who are funding it and who are making money off of it, and then there are like organizations that work with them on the side that are also funding it and doing the things. What in our community are putting the elements like in the sky and all around that we can actively participate in, so the people who are moving on the field with the all of that can win their game, and then we can have the parade in the city that's our own?
So that's an excellent analogy, and that brings me to one of the best quotes of my sister in the struggle, Queen Najaha Lone Wolf. There are different positions in revolution. And so it's just like that analogy. You may see the quarterback or the running back, but you don't see the offensive coordinator who has the playbook. And again, as many of the people on this stage have said, there's a playbook. We have to dust off the playbook. And so we all come to this from different perspectives on what we believe is the appropriate way to achieve liberation. But that doesn't mean that we don't support one another. And so for the last 3 months, I've been spending time talking to dead people. Been talking to William Trotter, been talking to Walter White, been talking to Ida B. Wells, been talking to Dr. King in the books. And then there's a great strategist of the movement, a lawyer who's still alive. His name is Fred Gray. I would suggest you read Bus Ride to Freedom, because that book lays out the beginning stages of the Montgomery bus boycott in strategic fashion. So now you can see what the movement was here, what organizations were doing it there, what the strategy was, who was funding it, how they actually funded the vehicles to get people, how they actually just wanted them to stay off the bus for one day. And then it turned into 180 some odd days because they continued to oil the machine. But in this particular movement, it's kind of dangerous to tell you all of those moving parts. But offline, you can get with one of these organizations, and trust me, there are owners in the skybox, there's a playbook, there are players, there are teams. Some people have different offenses and defenses. That's a conversation about what Mary just said. It's about organizing, what Derek just said. It's about organizing because, again, there's a reason why you don't know the tactics of some of the activists, because it's dangerous to put those tactics out in a fashion that the governor can fully expect people to show up. This is like when he showed up with his 1,000 National Guardsmen and figured there wasn't going to be any protest, but there was actually a protest, a very large, peaceful protest. And those National Guardsmen wasted all that time and that money. That was a strategy. So what I would just say is get with an organization, spend some time having a conversation with our ancestors about how they organized, and then implement it. That's the one thing I would say to people. When you read and you study, make sure you implement. Because we're just not reading for context. We're not reading for pleasure. We're reading to learn, so we can use the strategies that worked.
And let me say that there are strategies. I say to young people, do not have a martyr complex. We lost Malcolm, we lost Medgar, we lost Martin. You can kill a man or a woman, but you can't kill a movement. And so part of what I train young people to do, the one who is gung-ho and want to be out front, I put him in the back because you're too dangerous. There's some books you must have if you're going to be an organizer. If you're not studied Sun Tzu's The Art of War, if you don't have the 48 laws of power, when you strike the shepherd, the sheep will scatter. If you don't understand some basic foundational levels about warfare as I just said a few minutes ago, you cannot fight a system being unorganized, a system that is organized. Because city government is organized. It have lawyers, it have police, it has phone numbers and contacts, it has a jail, it has all of those things. It has the ability to co-op. We've seen that a lot. If I know you're the leader, I'm going to tell, watch that young lady in the pink jacket now. And when this is over, I need you to go find her because I got a job for her. I'm going to pull her out. I'm going to give her a $100,000 job at City Hall. I'm going to pull them out. And so we play one against the other. So these strategies, if you want to understand what happened, go and just study COINTELPRO. If you think these organizations have been infiltrated, I can tell you unequivocally that there are so many agents working in these organizations, you wouldn't even believe it, because they have to do that in order to know what you're doing. And that's why you have to be, the last part I would say to you, if you're not spiritually centered, if the Spirit of God is not in you and that's what's pushing you to get in these streets, stay at home. Because Malcolm meant it, that if I have to die for my people, then I'll do it. Martin knew every day his life was under attack. I'm not saying you have to have that same fear, but if that is not what's driving you, if you're just following the crowd because they got on nice jackets and you don't believe in your heart and soul that freedom is a road several traveled by the multitude, but that's where I'm taking my people, stay out of it, right? Because you are not going to, if you pick that cross up, be ready to carry it. But when I see the overzealous ones out here, and they're always the one in front of the TV. They're always the one trying to get you to run up the hill with the flag. They're always the one who's cheering the loudest and rah-rah. And then when it all goes down, they done disappeared. I don't fool with them. All right? But just get with some of us. We'd be glad to really let you begin to build and know why you're organizing. Because you need to know why you're organizing. I believe that a better world is possible. That's why I get out here. Not that I believe that I can look good on Channel 2, 5, 11, or 46. I believe that justice can happen in these cases. And the people that you don't see, many of us, while I've never said anything, many of us have a lot of contacts. I'm already working to jail before you, because I know you're going to jail. Because I've gone. I've been jailed 13 different times on different protest issues. But what we always make sure is some of our responsibility is make sure that your human rights, your civil rights are not violated. That's why we got plenty of attorneys around who will represent you and to make sure that they do not abuse you in any kind of way. And so we've gone to jail. I done got more people out because we have relationships. And sometimes those relationships work. I can pick up the phone with a Pat Labate and say, hey, man, these are just students. Don't put them in the general population. And so that's some of our responsibility as elders. But yeah, you have to study the successes and failures of organizations who fail. And we got plenty of them that failed in the past, and look at why they did.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. And I know everybody, it's resonated with everyone here. And so we want to get in these last two questions. And we'll ask our panelists to, maybe one or two of you can respond, depending on what the question is, but just listen and learn, everyone. Yes, what's your question?
Hi, I'm Laura Tate, and my question is, I feel as though in the Black community, we're looking for a leader, and there is none. Who would you all say is that leader right now? And secondly, there's a lot of discussion of systematic racism. What about when the system looks like you? And it starts, I feel, in the schools when, at the core, our children are everything. They are literally our future. So when they're being taught by this system, what do you propose, or how do you propose handling that or combating that? And for example, if you're in school, you talk a certain way, then our own children tell each other, oh, you're talking white, or having high standards, then you're lame or you're corny. And I just want to know how you all would say to combat that.
I have a few thoughts, shocker. Well, to your first question, if you're looking for a leader, love, you're going to have to look in the mirror. Yeah. Because one of the things I would say that this iteration of movement was very clear about was that folks, I remember folks were saying, so who the leader? Who the leader? And folks like, everybody, you know, all of us, because we have a leaderful movement. And to me, a leader, you know, and people are playing different roles for sure. Folks are on different assignments for sure. But I do think it is important that people understand leaders are people who do work, who are accountable, who are honest, who love our people, you know, who do a lot of what was just said, study, all of those things. And so I do think, and I will hold that I do think it has been a challenge because some folks is like, well, I don't know who to follow, because we have seen some folks, you know, we have seen some people who have come into our midst and have claimed leadership and have claimed that I'm the leader of, oh, we remember Sir Major, yes, no? Yeah. Right? There are very ones, and you want we could name some more, but there have been ones who have done that and betrayed our people, have been sent, right? And so it is kind of hard, but then that's where discernment comes in, and I think it also, you know, also joining organization and being a part of something, so it ain't just like rolling solo, you know, because we also need the political cover that comes with being a part of organization is deeply important as well. And so you know, the movement has an invitation for leaders all the time. So if you want to join organization, if you're like, I'm trying to know who to rock with, come holler at me. And if you miss me, because my wife gonna take me on a date, check out Community Movement Builders. Check out Whipping on the Rise. Check out Solutions Not a Punishment. I mean, I could go on, but there are some righteous organizations. None are ever perfect, but folks who are committed to struggling for this thing. And yeah, hit me up, Mary Hooks. I ain't hard to find.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
And I would just say quickly about that other question. Systems, structures don't have to have particular people who look certain ways to undergird them, right? To hold them up. So it doesn't matter if your child is in a school where there is nothing but black folks, that doesn't mean that system, that curriculum, that the frameworks aren't racist. And so it's very, very important that we not get confused about that, right? The biggest trick of systems of oppression is that people are taught, indoctrinated, acculturated to oppress each other and themselves within them. And so I think let's be sure that we understand that distinction as we continue to do the work.
Thank you. We have time for one more question and one answer.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dream, and I have more of a statement, opinionized option. I happen to have been at the Capitol on January 6th as well with those people who, you know, did what they did and so forth. And I was there for a different reason. I just happen to have a difference of opinion. I feel the same way, I do, I promise. But I have more of the dangerous Malcolm X views in which, you know, it was more, let's take some action, let's really be outside, you know. And I went there with intentions of antagonization. I was by myself, and I think of things like a movement where I felt like, maybe I should have brought some people with me. Maybe I shouldn't have went just me and the person I was dating at the time. It was given very much, I had a derogatory sign, and I went there, and I walked with them, walked all the way down to the Capitol, did a stop at Freedom Plaza. You know, I just wanted to see what they was on, really. And I always wondered, and I did a few other protests. I'm from D.C., by the way, also. I'm from D.C., so I was there. A lot of the times they did a lot of the protests. A lot of the times that they, you know, smoke bombed some of the houses in which people were giving refuge to some of the protesters. And I always just wondered, was there a space for us people? Because I know I just can't be the only person in the world who wants to take more of a physical standpoint against different opinions and actions that have happened to us as black people and that continue to happen to us as black people, that where we can be, I'm not gonna say safe because it's a dangerous situation, but where it's not always like, oh, we can't, because everybody's always like, oh, we can't be violent. And I'm always like, well, why can't we? Like, I don't see how it's different when they do it, but it's a problem when we do it. You know what I'm saying? I don't really see that. And I, you know, in experiencing that time that I was down there on the Capitol, while they was doing that, while everybody's like, oh my gosh, these people are doing this, that, and the third. And I thought, what a great place to be in one space with people who clearly, because they're here and they're doing this, feel the way that we always say, like, all people aren't like this. But clearly, these people in this space were. And I was the only person who felt like how I felt down there. I was the only person who was like, I see you down here. I'm down here too, but not to support you, not to support you, not to advocate for what you're doing, but to tell you that I don't like this and I don't care for you. And I want you to know that. And I want to make it a known fact. And I just always wondered, was there a space for people who felt like me?
Who wants to take that question?
Depending on the circumstances, yes. And the place you going to end up is not a good one. One of the things I encourage people to do, don't let somebody else give you an agenda. Counter demonstration is powerful, but something you've organized on your own. That was a very dangerous place, right? And so I would simply say, in that crowd, it wasn't a safe space for you, right? But I understand the need. That's why I say I have no problem letting people see the video, because I hope that it gets you to the point that you want to dismantle the institution that produced that, right? And so you just have to you're too valuable of an asset to our people to be down there, and they had turned on you because those people were willing to kill. They were talking about hanging the vice president of the United States, right? And so they wouldn't have thought nothing about this young girl from D.C. And so part of what our responsibility is to keep you as safe as possible. So you can be a revolutionary. I walked the street with Khalid Abdul Muhammad while he was live when he was a Southern Regional Minister here. I understand a real serious revolutionary, right? But at the end of the day, you are too valuable an asset just to be out and just to say, I'm here to show you I ain't scared of you. You know, what's more powerful is to organize and dismantle the mindset that produces that. But I definitely understand young people who is in that revolutionary posture, you know, and we just need to have a real conversation about what is the best use of that energy. But do not lose that zeal to be Queen Nzinga. Don't lose that zeal to be Harriet Tubman. See, Harriet Tubman was no punk. She had a word and she had a pistol. Because she said, some of these Negroes ain't going to want to be free. If I had to shoot them right here, split their wig right here, I'm willing to do it if it's going to get 10 more of them, because I can't afford to have somebody go back and tell. So we have to teach you how to be a proper revolutionary and keep that revolutionary spirit, but still be around here. Because we're at a dangerous time, and these people are not playing. They see their very existence on the face of the earth, what they are dealing with, their existence on the face of the earth being up. They ain't just dealing with no policy. Those people are not there for no policy issue. All right? Let's be very clear about that. And so we have to understand the time and what must be done. And I don't want none of our young people, either our old folks, to be martyrs anymore. We've had enough of those. Don't just die to be dying. Right? We don't need you to die to be dying. We need you to live. Right? Don't be fighting the police on the side of the street when we have Gerald Griggs who would go in there and represent you and have beat the police over and over again. Don't be fighting on the side of the road with the police. Don't give them a justification to shoot you out even at the protest. So keep that revolutionary spirit, and let's talk about how do we channel that into just something very powerful.
Thank you so much for that, Derek. And before we go, and I know we're running a little behind, I think it's appropriate, actually, that we're going to have a musical selection now. Jasmine Renee Ellis, who co-starred with Demetria and Maria Rosetta, is going to perform There'll Be Peace in the Valley by Thomas A. Dorsey, accompanied by S. Renee Clark.
I'm tired and weary, but I must travel on. where the morning so bright and the Lamb is the light, and the light will be bright as the day. There'll be peace in the valley for me someday. Yes, there'll be peace in the valley for me. Oh, yes, there'll be no sadness, no sorrow, no trouble. I see only peace in the valley for me. Where the bear will be gentle and the wolves will be tamed, and the lion will lay down with the lamb. Oh, yes, and the beasts from the wild shall be led by a child, and I'll be changed from this creature I am. There'll be peace in the valley for me someday. Yes, there'll be peace in the valley for me. Oh, yes, there'll be no sadness, no sorrow, no trouble. I see only peace in the valley for me.
Jasmine Renee Ellis, accompanied by S. Renee Clark. Excellent. Thank you so much. I really want now to take a moment and thank Derek Bozeman, Danelle Suggs, Gerald Griggs, Dr. Kalinda Lee, and Mary Hooks. Thank you. Thank you for fighting for our lives. Thank you for fighting for our stories. We really appreciate you, and I'm going to turn this over to Chandra. Thank you.
Janita Dew, thank you so much for your wonderful work as a moderator, and again, to add her thanks, my thanks to hers for all the work that you're doing for the community and all that you've done tonight to bring the message to the people. I want to also thank our amazing artists, S. Renee Clark, Jasmine Renee Ellis, Amitria Finet, Terry Henry, for their great artistry. I also want to ask you to please make sure to go back to the back, or make sure you had on your seat a pass for $10 off Good Bad People. We would really love to see you there, and there are flyers. We want to have you spread the word, and you'll get $10 off. So come on out and see us. We look forward to seeing you. Thank you so much.
And one more thank you to Brandel Jones for helping us plan this event and framing the conversation. Thank you.